melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah la'asok b'divrei Torah la'asok b'divrei Torah la'asok b'divrei Torah la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, we ended the book of Bereshit, and we are beginning the book of Shemot, Exodus. The book of Shemot actually means names. It's the first chapter of the book of Exodus. It does not mean Exodus. The book Shemot means names. So we had the book Bereshit. We talked about that. We're talking about with a pen that works.
How do I find that in here?
If you just go...
All right. I got Genesis, we're after Genesis.
And then right after the next book is Shemot.
Oh, yeah.
Literally, it's called Exodus, but literally it means names. Why? Because if we look at the very beginning of it, it says these are the names of the people who went down to Egypt. Book of Exodus is about Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher in many ways, but what happens to him. So if we look at the beginning of it, it starts off where it says in verse 8, chapter 1, a new king arose over Egypt who did not know of Joseph. Remember, Joseph is this amazing character, right, who was the leader of his people. Remember, we talked about the idea that Joseph, because he knows of the rationing that's going to happen, he becomes very powerful, and that Pharaoh becomes very powerful. But in that process, all the people who became sharecroppers or gave up their children for slaves or did whatever they had to do to get food to live, they're not so happy with Joseph and his relatives. Well, there is a political unrest and a new clan becomes the Pharaoh, a new group becomes the Pharaoh, the people who, it's a revolution in many ways. And so that group that we know about, they're now in charge, and they're looking at the people who were persecuting them earlier, of which Joseph was one, right? Because he was selling and rationing for the Pharaoh, and they don't like them.
So Elvis has left the building.
Elvis left the building, exactly, and it's an anti-Elvis group. Okay, and so now what are they going to do? And so this Pharaoh becomes king, and they don't know Joseph. They don't have any relationship with Joseph per se. Other than really disliking it, and the children of Israel grow to be very, very large. And so they become concerned that the children of Israel will lead a revolution to put them back in power. So this Pharaoh and this group then says, let us outsmart them before they become too numerous, and they make them into slaves, and they build the store cities of Pithom and Ramses. You then have this experience where it is prophesied to the Pharaoh that a child will be born who will dethrone him. And so he wants all of the firstborn Jews to be killed, Jewish males to be killed. But they're not, because the Hebrew midwives allow them to live. And there's a wonderful line here. The king, in verse 15, chapter 1, the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, of whom the name of the first was Shiphrah and the name of the second was Puah. And he said, when you deliver the Hebrew, don't look at page numbers, it's different page numbers.
I know, but
Okay.
are we looking at...
No, you're only looking at text. You're only looking at text. Text is all the stuff in this copy. Text is the stuff on top.
So,
This
so
is all
we're
commentary.
reading this part.
We're reading this. So, 115 is going to be over here, probably, somewhere in here. Of whom the name of what first was Shiphrah, and the name of the second was Puah, and he said, when you deliver the Hebrew women, you see them in a bristle, it says, son, you are to kill him. But the midwives were in awe of God. They did not do as the king of Egypt spoke to them, and they caused the boys to live. And they said it's because the Hebrew women aren't like Egyptian women. They quickly give birth, so we don't have time to kill them. It says in the Haggadah that we say on Pesach, it is because of the women that the Hebrews are saved. It is because of Puah and Shiphrah, because of Miriam, and because of the different women. And that's really important. It's especially important in Passover to teach to teenage boys. That's because of women that we get the Exodus. So this becomes a story of Moses. In chapter 2, we find that remember we had all those tribes? Well, one of the tribes, the tribe of Levi, there's someone there and she has a child. Okay? And she gives birth to this child and she can't hide him any longer. So she puts him in a wicker basket smeared with clay and pitch, and she places the child into it. And her name is Yocheved, and she places it into the river. And Miriam, the child's sister, kind of wanders down the river as well to see what's going to happen to him. Well, Pharaoh's niece or daughter or his ward, whatever it may be, named Batya, sees the child. She cannot have a child, and she brings the child in. And the Midrash says her arm extends extra long, so that God makes her arm become very long so she can pull the basket in. And she says, I want this child as my own. But there's a challenge. Pharaoh has said the firstborn Hebrews should die. So he doesn't want to say no to his niece, his daughter, whatever it may be. So his ministers devise a test to see how smart this baby's going to be. And they put Pharaoh's gold signet ring here, and they put a bunch of hot coals here. And the idea is, if the kid is smart, like most kids, they're going to go for the shiny thing and pick up the ring. Well, that would mean that this kid is going to dethrone Pharaoh. If, on the other hand, this is what the ministers tell him, the kid is so stupid that he's going to go pick up the hot coals, don't worry about it. And the idea is that Moses starts to reach for the golden ring, and the angel pushes his hand to take a coal instead. And what do babies do when they pick up things?
Put it in the mouth.
They put it in their mouth.
Oh,
So he takes the hot coal and he puts it in his mouth, and as a result, Moses has a cleft palate. He is never able to speak properly the rest of his life. So when we see things and we hear things when Moses is saying to God, but I don't know how to speak, I don't speak well, it's because he literally cannot speak well, because it comes from that teaching, from that experience. I'm going to ask that you don't write on the Bible. If you can just move, it's okay, just move the Bible, just move the Bible, that's all. that's it. Okay. So that's what we find about Moses. And Moses, now we have another challenge though. Batya wants to nurse, she can't nurse, so they get a Hebrew nursemaid. And who's the Hebrew nursemaid? Yocheved, his mom. So he's nursed with his actual mother, with Jewish blood, with Jewish milk. He grows as
so was he circumcised? I mean, she put him in after he was 8.
Well, the text actually will say it at some point, because he does ultimately.
Because then they would have known.
I know, but they realize he's Jewish, and he does. I don't know if I don't remember if they circumcised him before or after, but he does get circumcised. Moses is clearly circumcised. So he goes. And you got to, what you learned in the 10 Commandments by Cecil B. DeMille, you got to forget. Okay, because it's just not a good interpretation. If you want to see a good movie interpretation, Prince of Egypt is much better, the animated film. But he realizes who he is, and then he gets sympathy when he sees an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Hebrew, and he kills the taskmaster. And he hides it, and ultimately he ends up being sent out. Okay, he takes off and he leaves because he doesn't want to get judged for having killed this. Pharaoh heard about this matter and sought to kill Moses, so Moses fled from before Pharaoh and settled in the land of Midian, where he sat by a well. Now, he sits by a well. Let's recap. Who else has sat by a well, do you remember? Abraham builds wells. Rebecca is met by Abraham's servant at a well. Jacob meets Rachel at a well. So if it says he sits by a well, what is probably going to happen? It's going to be his wife. It's just a recapitulation, okay? So it says here in verse 15, he sat by a well. And the minister of Midian had 7 daughters. Now, this minister of Midian is Yitro, Jethro, becomes his father-in-law, who is both a priest and a leader, and ultimately will be incredibly righteous. He will denounce idolatry, and he becomes a very great leader and advisor to Moses. And the portion of the Torah which we read in conjunction with the 10 Commandments being given is actually called Yitro. Okay, he's one of the 3 very righteous men. And so he has 7 daughters, and Moses falls in love and becomes a husband, and ultimately becomes a father. And then he has this experience. He's on a mountain, and there's a bush. And the bush is burning, but is not consumed. Okay? And he notices it. Now there's different stories as to how he gets up there. One is that he's following a little sheep that got lost. One is that he's carrying the sheep back on his back, and God says this is the kind of person that we need as a shepherd of our people. There are all sorts of different interpretations, but he sees this bush that is burning but is not consumed. The question is, why did he see it? Most of us don't pay attention. Moses did. So, as an example, without looking, staying and looking at me, okay, so don't look away. What color is Orlando's shirt?
Well, he's behind me, I can't see.
You saw him earlier, right?
Yeah,
What color is the shirt? What color is the shirt?
black.
Red flag.
It's a shirt.
Yes, we go red plaid too.
Okay, and you can look. It's a sort of black and red plaid.
I
Okay,
knew it was something plaid.
right? Do we notice things? So I used to take students from Loyola out to Sunken Garden, which is the big quad at Loyola Marymount University. There's always palm trees all around. I'd have them sit down and I'd say, okay, you guys walk this Sunken Garden. Every one of you walks it 3, 4, 5, 10 times a day. Right? Of course they do. So great. You're all facing me. How many palm trees are behind you? Do we notice? Moses did.
Yeah, but a burning bush, I think, I would notice that.
Would you?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's nothing else burning,
Burning and not being consumed. Do we see miracles that easily? Or do we ignore them most of the time?
People
I
ignore what's
would-
right in front of them.
All the time.
I could show you some psychological tests that would.
All the time we miss things. We don't see miracles of life. Moses does. It's easy to say, oh, well, I noticed that. But the reality is no. We all miss it. Okay? We don't notice so many things. You all passed a big dreidel as you walked in here.
yeah,
What color were the letters?
Blue,
red.
white. They're actually, the dreidel was blue, the letters were white.
No.
What? What'd you say?
Each of the letters are a different color.
Well,
I said red.
Okay? They're each a different color. You saw green lights that were on the house, right? What were the green lights of?
An orange dreidel.
And what else?
It wasn't a snowflake.
Snowflake, good. Did you notice that there were menorahs and dreidels? You walked right by it. You could not have missed it.
I was looking at the, I saw the big dreidel.
Now, could you miss a bush that is burning but not consumed?
I don't think so. I
You missed the colors of a huge dreidel. You missed green lights in front of your face. We all do that, is the point.
Yeah.
Moses doesn't. And that's part of one of the teachings that we need to learn to be more aware of everything. That's part of what's important in Judaism, is to be grateful and to appreciate it. So, God tells Moses through this bush, and again we have this question, verse 4, chapter 3, God saw that he turned aside to see, and God called out to him from amid the bush and said, Moses, Moses, and he replied, Hineni, here I am. Does that remind you of other things? Again, we're recapitulating the same story over and over in a different way. It's chapter 3, verse 4.
Okay, wait a minute, so, I'm still confused.
You're not looking at this. You're
No,
looking
I know,
only at
so
this.
here's 4.
That's chapter 4, so go back to chapter 3.
Okay, so, okay.
Chapter 3, verse 4.
Oh, that's a verse.
That's the verse number, that's the chapter number.
Okay.
Okay? So, and you can always find it because up here it will tell you what the chapter and verses are on that page. So, chapter 4, verse 3, he says, Here I am, Hineni. Do not come closer and move your shoes from the feet, from the place which you stand upon his holy ground. And he goes and he says, I've seen the affliction of my people that is Egypt. I shall descend to rescue it from the hand of Egypt, bring it up to that land, to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and with honey. And so Moses says, Whom I should go to Pharaoh, that I should take the children out of Israel of Egypt. He said, For I shall be with you, God says, and this is your sign that I have sent you when you take the people out of Egypt. You will serve God on this mountain, on this mountain. Moses is still complaining, still doesn't want to do it. Moses says to God, Behold, when I come to the children of Israel, they're going to ask me, what is his name? What is God's name? What shall I say then? And God says, Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh. Okay? Which does not mean I am that I am. Okay? That's not what it says.
The movie's not true and accurate?
Nor is the
That's what
King
Barclay
James
is.
translation. So that's, what it literally means is, I will be that I will be. Okay? Ahiye, asher yeh. And Ahiye, the numerical value of the when we talked about Gematria in the first week, the numerical value of Ahiye is 21. So whenever you see a 21, it's looking at that kind of name of God. So he had called himself to Abraham. He had said his name was El Shaddai. Here he says, I will be that which I will be. I will be this, I will be. That's what you're to tell him. And he gives Moses a staff. Okay? And he gives the staff to him. He says, I want you to go take this, and I want you to go pull everyone out, and I will stretch out my hand, and I shall strike Egypt with all my wonders that I shall perform in its midst, and they will come out. Moses doubts everything. They're not going to believe me. So he gives him this, he makes this staff a special staff. Okay? Moses is constantly he's all constantly objecting to what God wants him to do, but he eventually does it. He is the ultimate reluctant servant. That's who Moses is, and the most humble human being who ever lived. So he finally goes back to Egypt with his wife Zipporah. She circumcises her son. I always look at this line. So Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son. Okay. God bless him. So he goes off and she stays there. And Moses goes with his brother, Aaron. So Moshe has a brother, Aaron, and a sister, Miriam. And God says, look, you don't have to talk much. You're going to do what's supposed to be done, and Aaron's going to be your mouthpiece, because Aaron's a very good speaker. Aaron's much easier about this. And they go back to Egypt, and they come to Pharaoh. And Moses comes to Pharaoh, and they come to Pharaoh, and they say, send our people out that they may celebrate for me in the wilderness. This is what God is saying. Moses and Pharaoh saying, why should I listen to you? Who the heck are you? Okay? And Pharaoh starts making it even harder, saying you shall no longer have straw to make your bricks. It becomes even harder and worse. And now the Jews start a habit that they're going to have for the next 3,700 years all the way to today. It's called whining. They're going to whine. Moses, you made it even harder for us. What are you doing? Constantly going to start their whining and complaining. Fetch. Exactly.
He didn't make things easy for them. They had a right.
He says, well, you know what? They have a right. Everyone's got a right to whine. Okay? God speaks to Moses in chapter 6, verse 2, where he says, tell the people, I am Hashem. Remember what Hashem means? Hashem meaning the name. And it is the four-letter name of Yud-He, Vav-He. Tell the people, this is my name. This is our personal name. And we talked about in the first class about this is the skeleton key, this four-letter name. And so Moses goes on and he tells the people this. And if you look on chapter 6, verse 6, actually chapter 6, verse 5. Moreover, I have heard the groan of the children of Israel whom Egypt enslaves, and I have remembered my covenant. Therefore, say to the children of Israel, I am Hashem, and I shall take you out from under the burdens of Egypt. I shall rescue you from their service. I shall redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgment. I shall take you to me to be a people, and I shall be a God to you, and you shall know that I am Hashem, your God. These are the four expressions of redemption, one for each cup of the wine that we eat at Seder, that we drink at Seder. Also, that's why each one is called a different cup. There's a hidden fifth cup, because the fifth statement is also here. I shall bring you to the land which I raised my hand to give to Abraham. So we have 4 plus a hidden fifth. It corresponds to the 4 cups of wine plus the hidden fifth cup of wine of Elijah's cup on a Passover Seder. Also corresponds to the 4-letter name of God. And that's why if you look at a Haggadah, you will see that the first one, there's all these different cups. There's a cup of redemption, a cup of promise, all those kind of things. Okay? And Moses is still constantly, he's very, very hesitant to do any of this. And we have this experience. God says, see, I've made you a master of Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother shall be your spokesperson. This is chapter 7. And Moses goes to Pharaoh, and he says, he takes down his staff and he casts it down before Pharaoh and it becomes a snake. And we know the rest of the story. This happens in chapter 7, verse 10. Pharaoh too summoned his wise men and sorcerers, and they too, the necromancers of Egypt, did so with their incantations. Each one cast down his staff, and they became snakes. And the staff of Aaron swallowed their staffs. The heart of Pharaoh was strong, and he did not heed them, as Hashem had spoken. Hashem said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is stubborn, he has refused to send the people. Go to Pharaoh in the morning, behold, he goes out to the water, you shall stand opposite him at the river's bank, and the staff that was turned into a snake you shall take in your hand. It goes on, and you shall change the water to blood. And that's the first plague. And we have these 10 plagues. Okay?
This is going kind of fast.
All right, go quickly.
Okay, so what are the snakes again?
He casts down his staff and magically becomes a snake. And the Egyptians do the same thing with their snakes, but Moses' staff, Aaron's staff, eats the other Egyptian snakes.
Okay.
Did you see the movie The Ten Commandments?
No.
Okay. Well, this is,
Well, when you have 4 hours.
I love the green mist. Okay, so we have these 10 plagues. Why do we have 10?
So where does the blood come from? The snake?
No, you fix it up, it becomes a staff again.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
different plague.
Okay, that's not a plague. That's just showing how powerful it is. But he's still Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and so he touches the staff and it becomes a plague. Now there are 10 plagues that we have. We observe them at Passover. We take a little bit of wine out of our cup and put them down. Do not, after you've dealt the 10 plagues, don't lick your finger. Okay, people do 10 plagues. Okay, now I'm going to lick my finger. Don't lick the plagues off your finger. Wipe it on a napkin. It's 10 plagues. 10 is a big number. There are 10 energy centers or sphirot in the human being. We'll study them later on. There are 10 times, 10 utterances that God creates the universe with. 10 is a very big number. It also is a 1 and a 0, which has so many meanings numerically. But there's another really interesting piece about these 10 plagues. Because one after the other happens. Okay? And Pharaoh's heart is softened and then it's hardened again. So, he has blood, but Pharaoh's heart was strong, he did not heed them as Hashem had spoken. So then they have more and more different plagues, right? They have frogs, they have lice, all these different things. Okay? This is a pattern that happens. Pharaoh's heart opens up when he has the plague, and then his heart hardens. If his heart hardens, couldn't God soften his heart just as easily?
I would think.
So, if that's the case, then all these different plagues, right? We have lice, and the same thing happens over and over. Wild beasts, plague, boils, hail, all these different things. Locusts, all these different things. What keeps happening is the same thing. It says, you'll find the great quote if you look at chapter 10, verse 27. This is after the 9th plague of darkness. Hashem strengthened the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not wish to send them out. Why is God strengthening the heart of Pharaoh so that he doesn't send them out? Couldn't God have just softened the heart and just said, okay, get the Hebrews out? That would have been the easy thing, right?
Is that part of giving us free choice?
But he's hardening Pharaoh's heart. So God does this miracle through Moses and Aaron, whatever the plague may be. Pharaoh said, get out of here, and then all of a sudden God strengthens Pharaoh's heart, and he says, no, you can't go. Why? It's confusing, isn't it? Right? So here's a beautiful understanding of it. Each of these 10 plagues corresponds to the 10 major deities in Egyptian cosmology. Okay? The challenge with the Hebrews who were living there is that many of them had adopted the Egyptian cosmology. They were worshiping Anubis or Osiris or Ra. And each one of these plagues shows that that god is not so powerful. Right? Ra, the king, the god of the sun. Well, darkness stops Ra, doesn't it? So who are the plagues really for? Are they for Pharaoh?
Sounds like for the children.
They're for the children of Israel. It's exactly who it's for. So they realize to go back. Now we're told that the generation of the Exodus merited the Exodus because they still kept the naming, they still kept the Brit Milah, the circumcision. They kept doing those things, okay? Even though they gave up so many other things. And one of the things they gave up was they started worshiping idols. Well, none of us in this room are living an Orthodox lifestyle, so in fact, are we not also in some ways, what have we given up for our own idolatry? How many people, how many of us have idolized money, power, cars, mortgages, whatever it may be, as opposed to what's important? And so each of those things are knocked off. I just was with someone who, he's been going through a very, very tough time, and I said to him, what an amazing opportunity. All the things that you thought were idols have been struck down from you. What do you want to be? You have freedom at your hand now. You can look at it and say, oh, I've lost so much, I gotta... Wait a minute. What you've lost was never real to begin with. It was an idol that you worship. Okay, you're not making what you once made. But is money what it's all about? Okay. So, it's an opportunity. So this is for, as you say, the children of Israel. The 10th plague is where he kills the firstborn. The firstborn of all Egyptians are killed. It's a beautiful midrash that God comes in the evening and God lets each firstborn Egyptian see God face to face. The soul jumps out of the body. But that night where God or the angel of death is going to go take the Egyptian souls, the way that we mark a Jewish home is all the Hebrews put blood on the doorpost. And so the angel of death, or God, passed over that home. That's where we get Passover from. And what's so really important of this is to understand something about faith. If in the morning no Egyptians had died, what would happen to every Hebrew living in a house where there was blood on the door? They'd all be killed. It was a statement to say, we are in revolution, we are leaving. It's dangerous. But this was the first time they stepped up and did something. All the plagues before happened to them. This one, they stepped up. Does that make sense to everyone? Celeste, you got that look on your face.
Yeah.
Does that make sense or no?
Well, what was the last plague?
All the firstborn, the Egyptians are killed.
That was what the plague was.
And the angel passes over.
God said this is what's going to happen.
Yes. And so they put the blood on the door so that death passes over those homes. That's where Passover comes from. Okay? And so this becomes a very big statement, though. All the other 9 plagues happened to the children of Israel. This one, they acted on. Does that make sense? They put blood on the doors. They didn't do anything, it became dark. They didn't do anything, it became lights. They didn't do anything, the Nile turned to blood. This, they were involved in, they had a
So
product.
they were saying, we are not the children of Israel.
No, they're saying,
no, we're not the children of Egypt.
Right. We're saying we want to pass over.
Separating themselves.
And we believe
It was an action.
so that we won't be killed.
So we're about to have Hanukkah coming up soon. Where are you supposed to put a Hanukkah menorah?
A window,
Why?
so everybody can see it.
So everybody can see it. It's a statement.
Does it work if it's on my front lawn instead?
I think that could, why do you have a little thing like we have with the dreidel, but you go over it as a menorah?
Oh, I have. I have
Yes.
a bear with the dreidel, but I have a big menorah.
Absolutely.
I It's 4 foot north.
You know, when we have at the Hanukkah party on the 22nd, the temple one, it's what, 12 feet high, would you say?
Yeah,
Maybe higher?
yeah, 14.
And that's what, about 10 feet wide?
Yep. What about
So
that?
that's
It's
what,
a little bigger than mine.
to make a big statement. That's
It's to
what
make a
that's-
statement, we put it in the window. We are dedicated to God.
I really
And
think
Passover was a dedication. They were making the statement, we are dedicated to God. So they're now thrown out of Egypt, and they go rushing out of Egypt. And we are told that that night shall be a festival forever, as they remember this, okay? On this, the plague of the firstborn. And God carries out the plague himself. It's not an angel of death. But it says here, the blood shall be a sign for you upon the houses where you are. When I shall see the blood, and I shall pass over you. There shall not be a plague of destruction upon you when I strike in the land of Egypt. This day shall become a remembrance for you, and you shall celebrate it as a festival for God. For your generations, as an eternal decree shall you celebrate it. For a 7-day period shall you eat matzah, but on the previous day you shall nullify the leaven from your homes. For anyone who eats leavened food, that soul shall be cut off from Israel from the first day to the 7th day. This is the whole definition of Passover. It is a biblical commandment.
Where's,
We find it in chapter
What they say you can't eat.
12, verse 14.
Okay, I don't get why you can't eat leavened
So,
bread.
most of us hear about the idea that you got to rush out, right? They had to rush out, they didn't have time to bake bread.
right.
And that's why matzah. But wait a minute.
It doesn't make sense.
Because this commandment's happening before they have to rush out, doesn't it? Right? This doesn't make sense, does it?
And it would have been leavened dough that they had in their packs.
So why? Why? What is leaven? Do you bake?
Some,
You bake. What does leaven do?
Right.
rises.
Does it add substance?
No.
Just puffiness,
Probably.
like arrogance?
Like what?
Arrogance.
Oh,
Okay. How do you make that leap?
That's what matzah is. Matzah is about, when we prepare to get the leaven out of our house, our meditations and our thoughts about it are to remove the puffiness from our life. To remove the unnecessary that doesn't have substance, but in fact is just puffiness. To be simple, to be real.
How do you get that? From where?
There has to be a reason, because there's lots of teachings for 2,000 years. But beyond that, how did they get to that is a better question. We know that it isn't just because of historical having to get out fast, because that doesn't make sense, right?
Makes sense.
Okay. So
I'm
what
trying
does
to
leaven
get that.
do? Leaven brings size with no substance.
I would have never gotten there.
Well, we're teaching you to think like a rabbi. Leaven brings size but not substance, correct?
Yes,
What is size but not substance in a human being?
arrogance.
My idol's better than your idol. I pray to Ra, you just pray to Osiris. Nanner, nanner, nanner. Right? Do you see how it starts to work in there? And so, go on. Is that your water?
No.
Or was that last week's water? Go on, I'm listening.
I don't know if I agree with it. Only adds puffiness because,
What else does it add?
well, compare the taste of a matzah to a taste of a challah.
What about it?
It's better.
well, challah
Yeah,
has
but there's
egg in it
egg.
too.
Okay, so,
Butter.
so a white bread. Any bread that's
It
just.
doesn't taste better than white bread. And you can have egg
Okay.
matzah.
So give me a French baguette. I'll take that over matzah any day. of
Because
the
you
week.
like the substance, the taste of it.
Yeah, well that's what I'm saying.
Fine, I
It's-
like people being proud of who they are. We should be proud of who we are. But there's also a place where that we need to come back and really know who we are, who our essence is.
I love matzah. Matzah. All the time.
You know the Friars Club? Every meal, a lot of places you go and you get bread when you go out, right? You sit down for lunch and they bring out a basket of rolls. They bring out a plate of little matzahs. They call them crackers, but little matzahs. By the way, where else do we see matzah in this world? Not in the Jewish world. It's communion way.
Communion.
It's communion way.
Yeah, we put that.
Okay, now, How many of you had matzah during Passover? How many of you had shmura matzah?
What's shmor matzah?
Shmura matzah is, you should always have shmura matzah the first night or the second night. The first night is the food of faith, the second night is the food of health. And that's from Schwartz. But shmura matzah is everything is washed from the time the grain is harvested until it's put in the box, and it's never around water for more than a total of 18 minutes. Shomer means guardian or guard, and it's guarded matzah. And it's handmade matzah. So Manischewitz is just these squares of matzah with little perforations. Shmorma's matzah is this big circular matzah.
No piece looks like.
Crispy.
And it's delicious, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, you can make matzah, it's easy.
Yeah.
That's what shmor matzah is. And it's delicious. Right? It's just as delicious as
This
bread.
was the first year we did it because of,
And how was it?
it's amazing.
It's a different experience. Right? So get shmor matzah. Get the real thing. And it comes in circular. It's almost, it's delicious. You can get it at Costco.
Yeah.
Okay? It's not, you know,
Okay.
it's a different experience, isn't it? To have shmor matzah as opposed to Manischewitz. So, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. It's Manischewitz. I apologize. I constantly have that problem sometimes. So, this is, and it's the essence. It has a lot of prana, it has a lot of energy in it, doesn't it? It's a different feel. It's shmor matzah. So, that's what becomes the way for
But there are a lot of other kinds of unleavened breads in the world.
Correct.
I mean, so,
tortillas.
yeah, that's,
No.
and,
You can make a tortilla. You can make a tortilla.
and like
There's a lot of-
ratas, you know, Indian food.
Yeah, but we're not Indian, we're Jewish.
No, I know, but I'm just
I
saying.
mean, could you make, the question is, does it have to be that, if someone's washing the grain from the time that it's harvested to the time, so it's never around water for more than 18 minutes,
Right,
it just doesn't have to have leaven in it.
okay.
That's why we have kosher cakes that are delicious. There's no leaven in them. We have kosher chocolate for Pesach. It's delicious. There's no leaven in it. You can't have kosher beer.
So if I made tortillas in
If you
less
made
than
them
18
correctly.
minutes,
So no, well, you have to
No,
watch
the
from the time of the
grain
grain.
needs to be,
The grain's never been around water for more than 18 minutes total from the time it's harvested to the time it does. Could you make homemade matzah? Yes.
If
Might
you
it
do
taste
the
like a
grain?
hard tortilla? Yes.
but I could make a tortilla.
In theory.
Can I buy the flour?
Has the flour been around water?
Well, that's not, I'm asking, do they sell the
You'd
flour?
have to find kosher Pesach flour, which you could find. I mean, I imagine you could. I've never made homemade
matzah
matzah.
flour. Passover matzah flour.
I assume you could.
or I'm sure
Matzah cake
cornmeal.
No, you can't have
You
flour.
can't have corn.
Why?
Corn is, okay, so
Grain.
we'll come to that in a moment. We'll come to that in a moment. So,
It has to be
first,
wheat?
hold on. So, you cannot have leaven. Now, there are certain grains that are prescribed here that you cannot have, that we find throughout the Torah. But what the rabbis realize is any grain that, when it's in water, if it's in water for 18 minutes, it has expanded. You are not allowed to have that grain. Now, corn was not something they were growing in ancient Egypt.
No,
Okay?
or rice.
Rice was not something they would go in Egypt. It's called
They had
kidneyot.
taft.
So it's called kidneyot. There are grains that the rabbis said, okay, you know what, this grain is forbidden, but rice is also forbidden because it expands. Now, the Ashkenazi rabbis identified by the Middle Ages that in fact rice should be forbidden for Passover. The Sephardim say that's ridiculous. It's not prohibited in the Torah. Oats and these other things are. So Sephardim will eat rice, and Ashkenazi will not. Sephardim will eat corn. Ashkenazi will not. Okay? And so you have to look on Passover depending on where you're from and what the laws are. So it's funny how many Ashkenazi Jews for Passover they become Sephardic. So as an example, here's a great example. Coca-Cola. In other places in the world, Coca-Cola is made with cane sugar. Here in America, Coca-Cola is made with corn syrup. But every year, about a month before Passover, you can buy bottles of Coca-Cola that have a yellow cap, I think, right? The white cap is regular. The yellow cap means, and it only comes out right before Passover, that's made with cane sugar.
Made with real sugar.
Real sugar, okay? And I have a friend, Rabbi Arthur Schaefer, he used to buy huge amounts of cases of the, because he loves Coca-Cola, or he used to, of the kosher for Passover Coca-Cola, so he'd have Coca-Cola with sugar all year, because he just liked it better than corn syrup. If you go to Mexico, you don't have it with corn syrup, they have it with sugar, cane sugar. Always, right? So what can you, so you can't have that. There are certain grains, certain drinks you can't have, okay? Wine you can always have. Can you ever have a beer? No. Can you have a vodka?
Yes.
If it's potato vodka.
Yes.
Not a wheat vodka.
No.
Can you have scotch? No.
No.
Can you have tequila? Always. Tequila is always kosher l'Pesach because it's made from a cactus.
And do they have cactus in Israel?
No. Yes, they do have cactus in Israel. Actually, it's called a sabra.
Yeah.
But no, it's made of agave cactus. But the point is, so laws have to do with what it's made of. So we have that whole concept of what you can and can't eat. But what it's really about is letting go and finding who we are at our essence. We don't need all the chazarai. We don't need all the trappings.
So why, and it's 7 days because it took them 7 days to go.
No, that's what he ordains it, right? It's 7 days because he ordains it. And so what ends up happening is there's this Passover, and then what happens from that? They start taking off. Pharaoh gets very irritated. They shouldn't have let them go. He has, not buyer's remorse, but I guess freedom remorse. And he takes off after them. And he follows them.
Indian giver.
He's an Indian giver of freedom, exactly. Don't insult me. So he gets to this, they get to this Yam Suf. Yam Suf is the term that is the name of the sea.
It's actually a misnomer. You're not insulting the Indians. The Indians must be givers. The white people were the Indians.
Or the liar, exactly. So Yam Suf does not mean Red Sea. Yam Suf means Sea of Reeds. Okay? And they get to the Sea of Reeds. Now what? Pharaoh and his armies are tracing behind. They're at the Sea of Reeds, and it's a scary, scary time because they're concerned, well, now what do they do? And we find this story at chapter 14.
So the Sea of Reeds is where?
We call it the Red Sea. It's the Red Sea.
Oh, okay.
But the actual name is Sea of Reeds. And so Pharaoh's chasing them. We're going to get there. We're going to be in chapter 14. And they get, and remember I said they got this habit of whining? So Egypt pursued them. This is chapter 14, verse 9. Pursued them, overtook them, and camped by the sea, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen, etc., etc. And the people cried out to Hashem. They said to Moses, "Were there no graves in Egypt that you took us out here to die in the wilderness? What is this that you have done to us to take us out of Egypt? Is this not the statement that we made to you in Egypt, saying, 'Let us be, and we will serve Egypt, for it is better that we should serve Egypt than we should die in the wilderness'?" They're whining. They've just seen 10 plagues, and they're whining already. Okay? And Moses says, "Don't fear, stand fast." And if we look to verse 19, we see that Moses, in verse 21, Moses stretches out his hand over the sea, and Hashem moved the sea with a strong east wind all the night, turned the sea to damp land, and the waters split. This is a beautiful midrash. But the sun is about to set, and all the people are whining, and there's a man named Nachshon, from the tribe of Benjamin, I believe, who goes into the Sea of Reeds until the water is right below his nose, above his mouth. As the sun is setting, an east wind, a shirako, blows. Because he has faith. And it blows, and in the morning, there's a sandbar that crosses the whole sea. That's one midrash. Another is that there's 12 sandbars, one for each tribe. Another is that there's 600,000 sandbars, one for each person. Another is that the waters themselves split apart. But in whatever it may be, they are able to cross the water in the morning. This is a big, big, big piece. When we get right before the sea, it says earlier that the multitudes of nations come out into freedom along with the Hebrews. One of those people, those multitudes of nations, go by the name of the Yoruba tribe out of Nigeria. And when the white man from Europe came to Nigeria and met the Yoruba people, the Yoruba people already knew about Moses and Joshua. And they said Moses played a junjun drum and Joshua played a talking drum. They already had their own stories about Moses and Joshua. So maybe it's real, isn't it? When they get there, Nigerians go this way, the Yoruba people go this way, and they go this way. So they cross the Sea of Reeds, and then the sea lands on Pharaoh's armies when he's going, or they're driving their chariots on the sandbars, which don't support them, and they die. In whatever way, the Egyptian soldiers all die. Another beautiful midrash. At that moment, the angels rejoice, and God says to the angels, the work of my hand is being destroyed, and you want to sing hymns of praise. It's not okay. We may have to kill our enemy, but we never need to rejoice in it. One of the saddest moments I've had maybe saddest may not be the right word, one of the most disappointing moments I've had in the last number of years is a number of years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, they were bombing the terror tunnels. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I walked into Old Oak Cigar Room. As I'm walking in, there's a TV with news and stuff. So I'm walking in, these guys are cheering like it's a football game. Rabbi, you gotta see this, you gotta see this. And it was news reporters or whatever showing film footage of these Arab terrorists going through a terror tunnel and then big white explosion, killing them all. Now we had to do that, let's be clear. The terror tunnel should never have been built and they should be destroyed. But is there anything to rejoice about in that? If we just killed 70 Arabs, we also just made 70 women widows and 300 children without a father. There's nothing to rejoice about. And I came down to all those guys and said, how dare you, how can you rejoice about this? A person's dying, people are dying. It has to be done, but we don't have to rejoice in it. So this all comes out of the Sea of Reeds. Okay? And then they go on in their journey. Any questions so far? Okay. So they keep going. And there at the Sea of Reeds, we turn to chapter 15. Moses and the children of Israel chose to sing this song to Hashem, and they said the following, I shall sing to God, for he is exalted above the arrogant. And it goes on. And then we have Miriam's song, chapter 15, verse 20. Miriam the prophetess, sister of Aaron, took the drum in her hand, and all the women went forth after her with drums and with dances. Miriam spoke up to them, sing to God, for he is exalted above the arrogant, having hurled horse with its rider into the sea. This becomes Micha Mocha Ba'alim Adonai. The women, led by Miriam, sing and with their timbrels dance. It's a great Debbie Friedman song. And the women dancing with their timbrels follow Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one who is exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced all night long. And Miriam, the prophetess, took her timbrel in her hand. Okay, it's a beautiful story. Miriam leads the people, the women, in singing and dancing. Go on.
Aren't they happy that the Egyptians died?
They're happy they're free. They're happy that God has saved them.
They're singing.
God has destroyed their
enemies.
enemies.
And the rider into the sea.
But they're happy about being saved, not about the death of them. They're just celebrating that they are free, that the soldiers were destroyed. Okay, and so they go and they do that, and they journey some more. Okay, and they start getting this thing called manna. Someone please read chapter 16, verse 4.
Hashem said to Moses, behold, I shall rain down for you food from heaven. Let the people go out and pick each day's portion on its day, so that I can test them, whether they will still follow my teaching or not. And it shall be that on the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring, it will be double what they pick every day.
So every day there's manna. And it's said that the manna tastes like whatever your favorite food is. But on Friday, since you can't pick the manna on Saturday, there's a double portion. So you have enough food for Friday and Saturday. And the manna would go bad after one day. So it's not like you could gather 2 days worth of manna on Monday, because on Tuesday what you gathered from Monday is bad. So that's about testing and having faith in God providing the manna. Okay? But what happens? What happens? The people start to whine again. The people start saying they're complaining against Moses, against the manna. You know, they're complaining. Why do we have this? Why we miss our food. We miss our food. And so God says to Moses, "I have heard the complaints of the children of Israel. Speak to them, saying, in the afternoon you shall have meat in the morning, and you shall be sated with bread, and you shall know that I am Hashem your God." And so there was so much quail that it descended and covered the camp, and it was coming out of their noses. Okay? They gathered, but no man shall leave it over until morning. So they became infested with worms, it stank, all those kind of things. And they learned, you know what, maybe man is a better choice. Okay? So they have this manna that they do. Okay?
And manna is what?
We don't really know what it is. It may have been psilocybin mushrooms for all we know. But it's some sort of fungus or something that appears, you know, the dew comes up, right? It's on the ground when they go pick it up every morning.
And that's what they eat.
That's what they eat and subsist on.
And that's all they eat.
Correct. Correct.
Magic mushrooms.
I don't actually think it was, but it had all the nourishment that they needed that God had created before. All right. This becomes very important. All right. Someone please read chapter 17, verse 8. Amalek.
Amalek came and battled Israel in Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, "Choose people for us and go do battle with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." Joshua did as Moses said to him to do battle with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur ascended to the top of the hill. It happened that when Moses raised his hand, Israel was stronger. And when he lowered his hand, Amalek was stronger. Moses.
Why would that be? Let's think about the image for a moment. Standing on a hill. Hello. Do you want a brownie?
Brownie?
You have to come downstairs and go for your brother too. No, other stairs. Come downstairs, other stairs, and you have to give me a kiss. Good night, both of you. So what's happening? Moses is standing on the mountain, right? And every time his arm's up, they're doing well. And when his arm's down, they're not doing well. When he's like this, where's everyone looking?
Up.
Up to heaven. Not so much.
Okay.
Okay? Better get down before children see me on the chair. So the idea is that when they remember to have faith in God, then I better get kisses first. You better bring one for your brother. I want to kiss goodnight. Okay, you need to go to sleep. Did you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So they're reminded, and when that happens, when they're reminded their strength comes from God, and they are beating Amalek. Go on.
Oh.
Keep it in.
Okay, Moses' hands grew heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, and Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on his side and one on that side, and he remained with his hands in faithful prayer until sunset. Joshua weakened Amalek and its people with the swords laid.
Go on. So they're going to beat Amalek. Go on. You need to understand, Amalek is attacking from behind.
Okay.
Okay? Go on.
Hashem said to Moses, "Write this as a remembrance in the book and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I shall surely erase the memory of Amalek from under the heavens." Moses built an altar and called it Hashem is my miracle. And he said, "For the hand is on the throne of God. Hashem maintains a war against Amalek from generation to generation."
What is that about?
So wait a minute, where is Amalek come from?
Amalek is descended from Esau, the Amalekites. But it's an interesting statement. Amalek attacks from behind. He comes behind them to attack and defeat him.
But he's not, so they
Whole other tribe.
They got rid, oh, it's a different tribe.
Yeah, this is a whole other group that happens to live in here.
Okay.
Now, God says, I will be at war with Amalek forever.
God said that.
Read it again. You just read it. What's it say?
How come we didn't like
What's it
Amalek?
say? What's it say? Read it.
It says Hashem maintains a war against Amalek from generation to generation. It doesn't say why.
Okay. So we got to go back. He attacks them with freedom from behind. What is Amalek? And there's an amazing book. I don't understand Levine, my copy. But there's an amazing book called Amalek, the Enemy Within by Shochet. Or by Shochet. They don't have. I think I learned Stan Levine. He still has it. I should probably get it back from this. And war. It doesn't say I will be at war with Amalek's descendants. It says we'll be at war with Amalek for always.
But it says from generation to generation.
That's how long, but it doesn't say Amalek's descendants. It doesn't say the people. It doesn't say the children of Amalek. At war with Amalek. So let's look at who Amalek is. Here's the camp of Israel, of the Hebrews. And here comes, and here's the front, they're going this way. Okay? And Amalek's coming this way and attacking. Who is at the back of the camp? Come on, who's at the back of a camp as they're moving? The old, the weak, the children, the vulnerable, right? So who is Amalek? He attacks the weak. Amalek is the ultimate perpetrator. Who attacks those of less power. He doesn't come around to fight the soldiers. He attacks this way, from behind. Why is this so important? Yes, he's at war with Amalek, but that doesn't make sense for generation to generation, right? It should say, God maintains a war against the children of Amalek. That would make sense, wouldn't it? Yeah. But he doesn't.
So is Amalek the name of the tribe?
Amalek is the leader, yes. Like we're called the Israelites. But it doesn't say children of Amalek, it says Amalek. So what is Amalek about?
So is he using that name as a generality for...
Go on. Now you're thinking like a rabbi. Go on. Now you're thinking Jewishly. Go on.
For someone who attacks the weak?
Bingo.
So it's more than just a tribe. It becomes
an archetype. Now, is that Amalek? So, if I see someone abusing a child, am I not at war with him? Always. But wait, is it only that kind of circumstance? What about a teacher and a student, God forbid? Anytime there's disparate power, a clergy and a congregant, right? A therapist and a client.
How do you apply that to the Holocaust?
In terms of?
The Germans had all the power, the Jews were the weak ones.
We were at war with the Germans.
But it says, Hashem will be
At war.
So
You don't think that God was at war with the Germans too?
I think he could have been a lot more successful, a lot quicker.
on the
Had he
other- on
wanted
the-
to be.
That becomes a whole other issue of the question of why did God even let the Holocaust happen?
Okay.
Okay, it's a whole other issue. By the way, there's a horrible, horrible, horrible interpretation of what we studied that maybe, since you brought it up, I will teach, even though I totally disagree with it. If the 10 plagues were for the benefit of the Hebrews, not the Egyptians.
I see what this is doing.
Oh, it's not pretty. I don't like this one at all, and I can't really buy into it. However, it's worth sharing. If the 10 plagues were for the Hebrews, not the Egyptians, who's responsible for all the deaths of the firstborn Egyptians? God? Or the stubbornness and stiff-neckedness of the Hebrews?
I was going somewhere else, but
And there is an interpretation that says, if you took all the Egyptian firstborn and all of their descendants that would have happened for 3,500 years, you would have roughly 6 million people.
So, could you?
Hold on,
Okay,
hold on.
all right.
so I was going in the right direction.
Yeah, Carl. I can't buy into that teaching. But people do teach it. We look at the world and we look at the universe through our very microscopic lens, through our very myopic lens, excuse me. God looks at it in a different way. Go on.
So, can we look at this another way? I mean, in nature, animals kill other animals, right? Lions, and they always go for the weaker ones. But that doesn't mean that's good and this is bad.
Are you an animal or a human?
No, but let me finish. So, the way you're saying it, it sounds like the perpetrator is bad,
Yes.
and this is good.
A perpetrator
But
is bad.
maybe what it's saying is that, because we say the Jews are the chosen people, it doesn't mean that that person is maybe not
Perpetrators
necessarily...
are always bad.
Yeah, but you're calling it a perpetrator.
No, that's what Amalek is. So, and there's a lot of,
It's not what it says.
No, it says Amalek, so you have to understand why it says Amalek, not B'nai Amalek. I would suggest actually you might actually personally really enjoy Amalek, the enemy within. Because it's not just the perpetrator outside. We all have a perpetrator inside, don't we?
No, I know that, but I'm just saying
It's
that
not-
in nature there...
We're not, are you an animal or are you a human?
Well, humans are animals.
No, not in Judaism. No, they're not, Celeste. They're not. They're not.
In
We're
na-
spiritual beings having a human experience. We are not animals having a spiritual experience.
Animals don't have the same conscience, I don't believe,
Dolphins, I think, have
the
more.
same thought process.
We're not animals. That's the point.
So duck hunt.
And what are we chosen for, by the way? Everybody's chosen for something. We're chosen, we bring Torah. We bring the ethical guidelines to the world. But that's not even the issue. The issue is why you're looking at the text. So we're starting to think Jewishly. Thinking Jewishly means that we fight about things, we dialogue about things,
Right.
and we explore things deeply. If there's not a word that's wrong here. If it was to be the descendants of Amalek, it would say B'nai Amalek, the children of
No,
Amalek.
but what I'm saying is that God said, okay, because you believe in me and Amalek doesn't, you're going to be my chosen
Where are you getting
people.
that from? It doesn't. There are a lot of tribes that don't believe in God, in a Hashem as God. But
Right.
they say, nowhere else, anywhere, does God say, I will be at war with Amalek forever. And it doesn't say the
See,
children.
I don't know that. I haven't
It
read
doesn't.
the whole
And it doesn't say the children of Amalek. It says Amalek. That is your key. That it's not about the people. Make sense? Now, do we all have a perpetrator inside us?
Yeah.
We do, right?
Well, it's because it's that part of us that wants to survive.
No. Perpetrator's not a part that wants to survive. Perpetrator is a part that wants to conquer. There is a difference. Survival instinct is very different than the perpetrator. The child abuser does not need to abuse the child for survival purposes.
So it's the Amalek's attacking because
The
he's...
weak. And so God says it will be forever, we will be. Forever. He will be at war, and we are to be at war with Amalek. Now, let's take it a step farther. Ultimately, Amalek, everything evil in Judaism, all those archetypes are, we'd say, are descended from Amalek. Hitler, as an example, or Haman, it says specifically, is descended from it. The persecutors of Jews are descended from Amalek, those specific guys like Haman. But let's go to where Shochet's book talks about when we go into the Amalek within. Do we all have weak spots inside ourselves?
Sure.
We do, right? Vulnerable spots that can be perpetrated against? And do we perpetrate against ourselves? We do, don't we? What is the ultimate example of that?
Guilt.
Even more so. Not a feeling, what's the ultimate manifestation?
Suicide.
Addiction,
Okay.
right? There's a weak spot in the addiction. And addiction is Amalek. You do not negotiate with a perpetrator. If you view the addiction not as this amorphous thing, but you view it as Amalek, do you negotiate? Does the alcoholic say, I'm just going to have one sip of wine?
They often do, it doesn't work.
You don't negotiate with the perpetrator. Does that make sense? You don't negotiate, and that's why we are always at war with it, externally and internally. The part of us that wants to be abusive internally, to ourselves or to others, you don't negotiate with that. If you have an addiction to whatever the addiction is, do you negotiate with it, or do you cut it out?
Work pretty hard at cutting it out.
That's our goal, right? The addict needs to remember that he or she is constantly at war with their addiction, don't they? That's Amalek.
Okay.
Okay? Both internally and externally. The abuser, the perpetrator. And that is any time there is a disparity of power, any time that there is, we know when we're perpetrating, we know when other people are, don't we? We know the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We know the difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the point is not, you don't negotiate with it. You're at war with it forever. And the moment that addict says, you know what, I can just take one little snort or shot or drink, I can negotiate with Amalek. What happens?
You lose.
You lose. True? It's got to be a constant, vigilant war. Not just externally, but internally. Remember, one of the laws in Talmud is if you see a crime being committed across the river and you do nothing to try and prevent the crime, you're guilty of the crime. We are Jews. We are chosen for things, and we are a light unto the nations. And part of that means when we see evil being done, we have an obligation to call it out.
Right.
Okay? I talked about this at High Hollanders in one of the Yom Kippur, I think. When we see anti-Semitism being going on, we have an obligation to call it out.
And a lot of
Whether it is by this group or by Tlaib and Omar, we have an obligation to call out the anti-Semitism. We have an obligation to call out things that are wrong. I wrote an article recently. How many of you watched these recent impeachment hearings? Okay. This is not an issue of whether Trump should be impeached, Trump should not be impeached. That's not my issue. It's personal politics. But what has gone on is potentially has destroyed our nation. When Adam Schiff gets up there and says, I don't recognize you, I don't recognize you, I don't recognize you, the whole dialogue between the minority and majority parties inside a committee, for the first time, because we've had other impeachments, the first time has been totally destroyed.
They made up their own rules.
My issue, I had a conversation last night with someone, my issue is not about the substance, my issue is about the process. And I think we have an obligation to say, you know what, that's not right.
Right.
And you're doing it now, and if you think the day is not going to come, there's going to be a Democratic president, and there's going to be a Republican House, and now they got the permission to do the exact same thing, don't they? We need to call out as Jews whenever we see injustice being done. That's who we are. That's why Rabbi Heschel of blessed memory marched with Dr. King. And when people said to him, why are you an Orthodox rabbi marching with Dr. King? He said, when I march with Dr. King, I'm praying with my feet. Because we have that obligation to be at war with Amalek. Whether Amalek is inside or outside, whether it is an addiction, whether it is someone who is a racist or an anti-Semite or a bigot, whether it is someone who is changing the rules to service themselves because of power. We have an obligation as Jews to stop that, to call it out, because we are taught right here, and we're taught throughout the Torah, that we need to emulate God. And God says, I am at war with Amalek from generation through generation. Because we're not animals.
No, I know.
We're not.
Dennis Prager just made that movie. I saw it yesterday.
No Safe Spaces?
Yeah, have you seen
I
it?
have not seen it.
It's in steamy. It's really good.
I heard it's pretty good. I am not, we are at war. We are not animals. And when a bunch of Jewish guys in a cigar lounge are cheering because some Arab terrorists are being killed, I have an obligation to say, you guys are jerks. Yes, it has to be done, but you don't have to rejoice in it. And when someone is an addict, we have the obligation is not to negotiate, but rather to say, no, I'm not negotiating, I'm at war. And that is the whole concept of the perpetrator. Now, does that make better sense to you? When it's phrased that way?
Yeah.
Okay? It's about, whether it's internal or external, we do not accept that in Judaism. And this is the only place, it doesn't say about the Canaanites or the Philistines, it doesn't say about the Babylonians or the Romans, nowhere does it say, I'm at war with this guy forever. God is at war with Amalek forever. Not the Bnei Amalek, not the children of Amalek, but with Amalek. That's how we know it's an archetype.
Okay.
Yeah.
So hunting is okay in Judaism, correct?
If you need the food.
If you need the food. So,
Although I don't think, you know, the part of the conversation is how do you kill a deer in a kosher way if you're hunting. But go ahead.
okay, so duck hunting. When you're duck hunting, they're flying, and you don't go for the duck in the front. You go for the
What are you, Sergeant York?
Well, no, that makes a good point though. You
Right.
know the reference you're talking about. You
This
go
isn't.
from
This
the back,
isn't.
so you don't.
I'm not saying it's not the way to attack, and it's not the smart thing.
I'm saying, how
Wait.
does
Again,
would we be looked at as Amalek for hunting in that?
no, because it's not human beings.
Okay.
Okay, and you could even make the argument that when you're at war, you can do different things, but this perpetrator, that's why we know that what's going on here is an archetype, because it says, I am at war with Amalek. Last I checked, Amalek ain't alive 3,500 years later. So we know we're talking an archetype. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This perpetrator. I really want to recommend, if this is an interesting issue to you, to look at the book Amalek, the Enemy Within by Rabbi Shulchan. Fabulous, fabulous piece. Okay? So, this is where we go into. This is this concept. You know, we've had this, the plagues, and the Jews are whining. And we've had this crossing of the Sea of Reed, and the Jews are whining. And we have manna, and the Jews are whining. And we have a perpetrator, and God says, no, we're always going to be at war. And when do these whiny Jews, when are they able to step up? When they remember to look up, that everything comes from God. Think about that, right? They've had all these miracles, and what we'll study next week is Rosh Hashem, is not only the giving of Torah, but the issue of what happens after the giving of Torah when we break God's heart. And we have the golden calf, the molten calf, where we break God's heart. This generation has seen all these miracles, and still they have a slavery mindset, don't they? Right? They still have a slavery mindset. Well, let's go back to the good old days of Egypt. One of the reasons The Prince of Egypt is such an interesting movie is when they were developing it, they were talking about Egypt was, the animation of Egypt was very colorful. As they got into the desert, the idea is that it's becoming more and a different kind of colorization. Yeah, you know what? Egypt looks nice. And I think it's the Sufis who say God gave us water so our bodies could survive, and God gave us the desert to teach our spirits. And they will wander in the wilderness, and they will have these amazing experiences, but always we are at war with Amalek. We're not animals. We're Jews. And that is such an important piece. Okay? So, we'll do this next week. We're going to talk to the Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, and where that goes on, and stuff like that. It's interesting stuff. Okay? And again, the idea being, we have these plagues now. Now does the Passover Seder make more sense to you? Yeah? Yes? No? Yes? 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 Okay.
I thought when you were first talking about they wanted to kill all the firstborn, that's where the Passover came from.
No one wanted to kill the firstborn. God says God will kill the first. God
But
kills the
that was
firstborn.
after I mean, when you started tonight, you talked about Pharaoh and then the midwives.
Yeah, no,
saved
that's even before that. That's years before that.
So I thought that's what
No,
Passover
Passover
was.
is when God is going to kill all the firstborn, and we put the blood on our doorpost so that God passes over.
Okay.
That's literally what it is.
It's
the way
kind of
Passover.
similar to the other part.
There's a similarity that it's kind of a retribution for when Pharaoh's killing firstborn. Absolutely, absolutely. But no, that's the Passover is not about that. Passover is about that, and it's important to remember that we get out of Egypt because of the women. The women are the ones who get it done. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Thumbs up? Perfect.